Good morning, coming to you live from Nasdaq's global headquarters in Lower Manhattan. Welcome to Advisory Live, brought to you by Nasdaq Corporate Solutions. I'm your host, Will Briganti, and joining me this morning is Miles Clouston. Miles, thanks for being here.
Great to be here, Will.
All right, so for all of our viewers who are joining us live on Twitter, on Periscope, Miles is Senior Director at Nasdaq Advisory Services at Nasdaq Corporate Solutions. So Miles, obviously this has been a week of economic data.
Absolutely.
Let's kick off by discussing jobs data. Let's talk a little bit about employment data.
Absolutely.
What can you tell us?
Despite it being a short week, we certainly have a lot of data coming out. So we just had the ADP data, jobs data out this morning, which came in a little bit disappointing, a little bit soft, came in at 158,000 versus the expectation for around 185,000.
Okay.
So that could somewhat signal that we may see a slightly softer number tomorrow in the jobless claims.
Right.
Excuse me, not the payrolls, non-farm payrolls tomorrow. So that'll be something that we could interpret that we may see that tomorrow. Also for tomorrow, we're expecting the unemployment rate to probably remain around 4.3%. The one caveat there around the soft number this morning and potentially tomorrow is that there's not a lot of slack in the employment market right now as far as people looking for jobs, and so it's somewhat natural to expect that jobs growth is not going to be continue at such a robust pace from non-farm payrolls as well as ADP data today. So just some further context.
Sure. So, and of course, switching to my next topic, which is the Federal Reserve, obviously they're keeping a close watch on all of this data. Let's talk a little bit about interest rates. What can you tell us? The minutes were just posted yesterday, right?
Correct.
From the last meeting. What can you tell us about all that?
Yes, it's interesting. Obviously, the last meeting, the Fed was definitely a little bit more hawkish than expected. They've been pretty dovish and accommodative. They continue to say they will be accommodative, but clearly they seemed very strong in some of the language, or at least signaling that they did want to do one more rate hike, and then also wanted to start to address the balance sheet in maybe sometime by the end of the year. So definitely it was a little bit more of a hawkish tone, and so the expectation is somewhere in Q3, probably the September timeframe for a potential another rate hike.
All right, so keep an eye out on the Fed as we go into the end of Q3.
And just on top of that, we've talked a little bit about the jobs front. Yeah. On the inflation front, that's really the key one that they'll be looking at, and in some of the minutes the recent minutes that were posted, they continue to say sort of transitory and idiosyncratic factors that they think that there's still some lagging in where they'd like the inflation data to be closer to their 2% target.
Great. Okay, let's switch to the markets for a second. Obviously, U.S. markets continue to push to all-time highs. How does this compare with relation to the rest of the global markets?
The markets have been, really strong. They seem to be tapering off a little bit of late, but certainly, not necessarily unusual to see that.
And any specific sectors that sort of you're looking at, keeping an eye on?
Tech, especially because they were really the leaders over the last several months, and so especially some of the FANG stocks and just tech in general.
Now, FANG stocks. Some of our watchers will probably know what FANG means, but can you kind of just explain that a little bit for those that maybe aren't aware of that?
Sure. So it's really some of the bellwethers in the tech industry, and it's not all inclusive, but it's Facebook, Apple, Amazon. Netflix and Google, which is now Alphabet, correct? Okay. So that's the FANG equation.
Thank you.
Happy.
Yeah.
And then biotech group has started, and just healthcare in general has started to garner some attention to financials too, especially around rate hikes. We've seen them be an interesting sector to follow. So there's a lot of news and a lot of interesting dynamics, and then we continue to watch what the administration is going to do around all the reforms. Clearly nothing's going to happen, unfortunately, before the July break, and so it looks like most of that information is pretty much tabled now. But there's the hope, at least by the end of the year, we'll at least see some things, even if not everything is kind of ironed out, but we see progress. That is what the market will be looking for.
And your colleague Tamar Essner was on CNBC this morning discussing global energy markets, particularly with relation to global oil prices. Any kind of quick comments on commodities that you can share?
Yeah, commodities have been depressed of late, and I think there's been a lot of interesting discussion. Tamar's probably spoken to it around how typically where oil is, there's some correlation to around somewhat of a level of health in the overall market. There's been a little bit of a decoupling of late, just because of some of the the output issues going on, production issues going on with the overall oil space, and too much supply out there, and how they're trying to navigate that. It's obviously very complex,
Yeah.
and not only economy-wise, but political-wise.
Sure.
And so there's certainly a lot of moving parts
Yeah.
on the oil front, and commodities in general have been depressed.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Miles, for that insight. Before we let you go, obviously we're into the first round or second round now of the Wimbledon. That's right. So, what is your prediction here?
I think
You're a big tennis fan, right?
I'm a huge tennis fan. Grew up
Former
playing tennis.
Division I player, right? Isn't that what?
Back in
yeah.
the
Okay.
day, yes.
Wake Forest Deacon over here, right?
Back in the day, but no, I think on the men's side it's going to be really interesting to
Yeah.
see. I think a lot of people are secretly hoping we'll see a Federer and Nadal matchup in the final.
That'd be great.
I think clearly Djokovic is, he's been a little bit off of late, but he's going to want to prove himself. And then Murray's always out there, always a contender, but I think right now the Federer and Nadal is a very intriguing potential matchup. Clearly it's anyone, there's anyone could win it who's still around. And then on the women's front, it's going to be really interesting, especially with Serena not playing this year.
Right. Venus Williams, a lot of attention has shifted back over to Venus
Yeah,
Williams.
Venus
right
has
now.
been playing great,
Right.
the last probably 2-3 years. So I think it's really anyone's especially on the women's side,
Yeah.
as far as who could take the crown there, especially
Yeah.
with Serena not involved.
Yeah, sidelined. Yeah, for the rest of the year. Okay.
So
well,
what about you?
Well, I mean, I'll admit I've been slow to pick up on tennis this year. I usually start to pay attention around the U.S. Open.
Yeah, it's
around
always
Labor,
exciting.
Around Labor Day, obviously it's in our backyard, so that certainly helps. Well, Miles, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us. And to all of our viewers, thank you for tuning into this week's edition of Advisory Live, coming to you live on Twitter. You can always follow the rest of Miles and the Nasdaq Corporate Solutions team right here on Twitter. Be sure to follow us at MyCorpSolutions, and you can always follow at Nasdaq for further information on global markets, particularly in terms of investor relations insight. For further updates from the Corporate Solutions team, be sure to check our blog on business.nasdaq.com. We'll see you right back here next week. Until then, enjoy the weekend, and we will see you next week. Thank you very much.